Okay, I'm Rick Lowe. I'm an artist, and I spend a lot of time talking about stuff that I don't know anything about, and tonight is no exception. So, but what I did do though is I contacted a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, and I told him I was going to have to talk about leadership, and we talked about it. And he says, "Well, I'm going to introduce you to a very, very, very old friend of mine. His name is Aristotle." And so we talked about it, and it was it was interesting because we just kind of thought about what Aristotle would say about leadership, and so for all you Aristotelian scholars out there, forgive me before I start because I'm going to bastardize everything that you've heard about him, I'm sure, but I also, in my defense, I say that I'm an artist, and I have a license to reconfigure things in unusual ways, so that's okay. But at the top of Aristotle's kind of matrix of moral virtues is courage, and he talked about courage as that it's formed by our attitudes toward fear and confidence. Now, when we were talking about this, we were trying to say, would that mean that he would think that would be the ultimate thing for a leader? And so we said, probably, yeah, that's probably true. So we went on discussing that, and we started talking about this idea that if courage is the top thing, and it's about confidence versus fear, you might want to even say that you could basically say that weakness is fear is a weakness, and strength. And confidence is a strength. And you could also go further than that and say that, weakness is the negatives and strength the positive. So we're sitting here, and I said, I'm talking to this thing about leadership, and there are probably all these strong leaders out here in this audience, and they're all over, this place is pulsating with all these, virtuous people with all this confidence and strength and all this stuff. And I started thinking about myself. And I told him, I said, I'm going to write this stuff down, but I'm going to do what I usually do, is I'm going to disregard it because I don't trust myself. And but I'm going to use it as a little bit of a crutch here. But what I decided though, that I would actually position myself on this thing about leadership, not from the perspective of confidence, but fear. This notion that fear as a weakness could somehow be a powerful source for leadership. And also to help contextualize that, I was reading an article that in the New York Times about a basketball player in Houston. Now before I do this, I'm going to tell you, my life is kind of shaped and formed by the work that I do as an artist. But I didn't come to art until late in life. I started out playing basketball, and that's where I first formed my sense of how I perform and act in the world. And so I tell you that because I'm going to talk a little bit about basketball. This article was very interesting. It was about a player in Houston named Shane Battier. And, this guy was a guy that I see somebody nodding their head, they probably read the article. But this guy, was someone that was on a team, and Houston was looking for players that didn't cost a lot of money, which is kind of unheard of in the NBA. But he stumbled upon this guy, Shane Battier, who had very poor statistics in almost everything. It was just like the guy couldn't shoot, he couldn't jump, he didn't rebound. It was just all these no statistics. But then as he looked at it closer, he found something that was really interesting about this guy, though. Even though he couldn't shoot and he didn't jump well and he didn't do any of that stuff really well, whenever he just looked at all of his times when he was playing, whenever he was playing, his team was always better. And he thought that was really interesting. So he started looking at, what is it that makes the team better? And I think the only thing that can describe this is basically that, this guy realized what his weaknesses were. He knew that he wasn't the best shooter. He knew that he wasn't the best rebounder. He knew all that stuff. But he also had this kind of quality that leaders have, though, this kind of insight into situations or objectives, and finding, kind of setting up goals and objectives to get there. But he realized he didn't have the strength to get there himself. So he employed the strengths of others. So he spent all of his time on the court trying to figure out how to get the best shooters in the right spot, how to get the best defensive players in the right spot, and all that kind of stuff, And that was really interesting because it started to resonate with myself, in the practice that I'm in now. And I started out studio practice, and in that environment, it's an environment where it's about controlling your production, and you kind of know the process throughout. There's a certain level of confidence that comes with knowing. But when I moved into the social realm and started Project Row Houses, which was my first socially engaged work, I realized that I didn't have a clue what was going on. I didn't know how to do it. It was just, so this incredible amount of fear just came over me that, how do you do something that you don't know anything about? I didn't know anything about real estate. I didn't know anything about architecture. I didn't know anything about program development, fundraising, or any of that stuff. And so I had to figure that out. How do you lead in a situation that you don't know? And what I realized that was the opportunity that allowed me to become the kind of leader that I am, which is one, not unlike Shane Battier, is one who really looks for the opportunity to provide people to utilize their creativity, to bring themselves into the process, to invigorate something that has their stamp on it. And when I start thinking about that, I think about how like basketball, what my production as an artist doing socially engaged work was doing, it reminded me, or kind of reinforced this notion of this deep appreciation I had all the way from basketball, this notion of collaboration, collective work together, and also collectively, or sharing the responsibilities and the rewards that comes with it. And so that was really kind of an eye-opening thing for me to kind of think about Aristotle and his idea of courage and all that stuff, and then throw in this basketball thing. But then I was thinking about, so what would be the other side, the bookend of that Aristotle would probably kill me if he heard me saying that modesty had any role in terms of leadership, because Aristotle places on his little index of virtues, modesty comes second to last, and and he squeezes it in, but he squeezes it in a way that he excuses it and says that modesty is not really a virtue. It's just really something that is in place to kind of restrain adolescents from doing adolescent things. But so I don't know what adults were like in his time, but when I look around and I know myself and I see the adults around me, and I don't see too much separation when it comes to selfishness between adolescents and adults. So I don't mind a little modesty or humility. And so one of the things that I've always tried to, the reason I kind of attach myself to this notion of weakness or fear is that I can allow myself to be, to have some humility. At a time in which we, with the media the way it is, everybody's pushing and pumping up, the individual, the stars, and this kind of stuff, it gets really, it's hard to be humble in our society and to be successful and humble. And so for me, when I go back and I start thinking about my weaknesses, and my fears and that kind of stuff, I know, I'm not kidding anybody. I know that when you're talking about leadership, the bedrock of leadership is confidence. That's where it is, right? But for me personally, to be able to draw back and kind of look at those fears and weaknesses and kind of contextualize what I'm doing in that, it gives me an opportunity to remind myself that I'm no better than the people that I'm working with. And that's the thing that kind of keep my leadership style kind of couched in a way that is one that I think is about sharing. Thank you.